Since I've decided to use a sidebar alongside my posts, I do need to go ahead and configure and design this sidebar. Now, a couple of quick notes about sidebars. First of all, keep in mind that the vast majority of people browsing the web today are doing so on their smartphones and tablets. So chances are a good portion of your audience will never even see your sidebar. So does that mean that you shouldn't have a sidebar at all? Not necessarily. Now, I think a lot of web designers, myself included, are moving away from the tendency to have sidebars just because most people aren't going to see them. But it is a tool that you can use to drive meaningful action among the audience that does view your website on a larger screen like a desktop computer. So that brings me to the other idea I want to mention here, which is sidebars should drive meaningful action. I don't like to just throw a bunch of random widgets into my sidebar. My philosophy is that less is more, and I want to include the widgets that are actually going to encourage people to take the action that I want them to take, whether that be signing up for a newsletter, buying a product, or just browsing other content on my website. So that's typically where my mind is at as I'm creating a sidebar. Now, to edit this sidebar, we could go into the widgets area here in the customizer and go to sidebar 1. I personally find that it's kind of difficult to edit things over here because the space in the control area over here is very limited, and it's hard to manage the settings for individual blocks. So I'm actually going to go back to the WordPress dashboard, go to Appearance and then Widgets, and I'm going to edit my sidebar from here. So here we've got the familiar block editor, and we've got plenty of space to work with our sidebar for block settings and all that good stuff over on the right. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and delete everything in this sidebar. So I'm going to remove all of these blocks. Actually, we'll go to the list view, and we'll just delete both of these groups right away. So we've got a blank sidebar now. And the first thing I want to add is a newsletter subscription form. So to make styling easier, I'm going to use a row layout. And I'm just going to do a single column, straight across row. So we've got our row layout. And then we've got a section within that row layout. So I want to add a form to this section. So this is the cadence form block. You can see by default it is a contact form, which is not what we want, but we can customize it. So I'm going to remove the name field. I'm going to remove the message field. And then we've just got the email. Now over here on the right, actions after submit is where we would configure what is going to happen with the form submission here. So if you're using MailChimp, for example, you could check that, and that would add the user to a MailChimp list. Now that does require the pro version of Cadence blocks, but for this example, I'm going to skip configuring this. I'm just going to leave it as is for styling purposes. You could also use any other form plugin for this purpose. You could use WP Forms. I think MailChimp has its own WordPress plugin if you wanted to use that, if you're using MailChimp. But again, this is just for aesthetic purposes for getting this theme configured. So I'm just going to leave this as is. Now, the next thing I want to do is clean this form up a little bit. So for example, I don't want to show that asterisk there that shows that the email field is required. So I'm going to turn that off. And then I want to edit this field where it says email settings here. And I want to remove the label. Once I've done that, I'm going to enter a placeholder. So we'll say, enter your email. And I think that looks better. Next, I want to edit the button. So we'll go to Submit Styles. We could choose the button size, the button width, all that stuff. I think we're going to do full width on the button. And we'll say subscribe as the text. So we've got our email field, we've got our subscribe button, but we do need to add some text to tell people what they're actually subscribing to, right? So if we go back to the row layout, we'll add another block. We can add a block here. We'll make it a heading. Actually, I want to make sure this is within the row layout and above the form. So we'll say, get the newsletter, and then we'll say join more than 500,000 subscribers of the free tech blog newsletter. Now, to bring this all together, I want to add some styling to this row layout itself. So I think we're going to do a background gradient. So let's see what we can do here. I think that's going to be under background overlay. Yep, background overlay settings. So we'll go to gradient. And for our first color, I'm going to do this dark purple color. And I'm going to fade that into the first accent color. Now I want to change the overlay opacity to 100%. So we get the full effect of those colors. And then, of course, I am going to have to go back and change that text color. But first, I notice that because of the gradient we have on our button, the purple is sort of blending in here. So I think I want to change the gradient angle just to separate that a little bit. And I think that looks good. So we'll change the color of the heading text here. Make it white. Same thing with the paragraph text. And then I'd also like to center this text. So we can do that up here, align text center. Same thing here. And that is our newsletter subscription form. So the next bit of content I want to add is a recent posts area, just to encourage people to continue browsing the site. So I'm going to add another row layout. Same thing here, all the way across, full row. And I'm going to add posts, the cadence posts block. So over in the sidebar, we're going to select posts as the post type, newest to oldest. And I think we're just going to do 3 or 4 items. So moving down to the layout settings, we don't want to have columns. So let's go down to 1 column. We're going to put the image above the title. We're not going to show categories here. And I do want to bring the font size down quite a bit for the titles. So let's bring it down to maybe 18, maybe 20. And then I also want to remove the meta info and the excerpt. We can keep the read more link, but I think I'm going to change it to read post. And then if we want to get a look at what this is actually going to look like on the site, we can update the widgets, hop over to the front end of the site, click on a blog post, and our newsletter widget is here. It looks really good. And we can see our recent posts as well. We could also add one more section to this sidebar. Remember, we want our sidebar to drive meaningful action. So we're going to add an option to subscribe to the premium subscription of this blog. So we're going to add Another row layout. Once again, it's going to be a full row, no columns. And here we're going to add a heading, and we'll say premium content from Tech Blog Plus. For this one, we'll keep it very simple. We'll just add a button, and we'll say learn more. Now I do want both of these to be centered. And then I want to go back to the row layout and add a background to this. I think with this one, we'll do a background image. So I'm going to drag in an image. We'll see how that looks. Need to change the text color of this heading. Make it white. And we'll update and go check that out on the site. So that heading is a little bit big. I think I'm going to reduce that a little bit. Make it maybe 22 pixels. We'll see how that looks. Premium content from Tech Blog Plus. That looks okay, but it could use some breathing room. So let's add a spacer here. We'll turn off the divider and just add maybe about 40 pixels of space. When we refresh, that looks good. Now, one more thing that I could do here is round off these corners a little bit by adding a bit of a border radius. So I don't want it to be too extreme. Just want to soften the edges. So let's see how that looks. 5 pixels. Nice. I'm happy with that. Premium content from Tech Blog Plus. And we could add a little blurb there as well, like we did with the newsletter widget. But yeah, that is a solid sidebar. I'm happy with that. And I think I'm ready to move forward.